Congregational churches are Protestant Christian churches practicing Congregationalist church governance, in which each congregation independently and autonomously runs its own affairs. Congregationalism is often considered to be a part of the wider Reformed tradition. Many Congregational churches claim their descent from Protestant denominations formed on a theory of union published by the theologian Robert Brown in 1582. These arose from the nonconformist religious movement during the Puritan Reformation of the Church of England. In Great Britain, the early Congregationalists were called separatists or independents to distinguish them from the similarly Calvinistic Presbyterians. Some Congregationalists in Britain still call themselves independent. Congregational churches were widely established in the Plymouth Colony and the Massachusetts Bay Colony, and together wrote the Cambridge Platform of 1648, which described the autonomy of the Church and its association with others. The model of Congregational churches was carried by migrating settlers from New England into New York State and then into the Old Northwest, the Northwest Territory, won in the American Revolution, now the states of Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, Ohio, and Wisconsin. With their insistence on independent local bodies, they became important in many social reform movements, including abolitionism, temperance, and women's suffrage. Modern Congregationalism in the USA is largely split into three bodies: the United Church of Christ, the National Association of Congregational Christian Churches, and the Conservative Congregational Christian Conference, which is the most theologically conservative. Congregationalism, as defined by the Pew Research Center, is estimated to represent 0.5% of the worldwide Protestant population. Origins: Congregationalists believe their model of church governance fulfills the description of the early church and allows people the most direct relationship with God. Congregationalism is more easily identified as a movement than a single denomination, given its distinguishing commitment to the complete autonomy of the local congregation. The idea that each distinct congregation fully constitutes the visible body of the church can, however, be traced to John Wycliffe and the Lollard movement, which followed Wycliffe's removal from teaching authority in the Roman Catholic Church. The early Congregationalists shared with Anabaptist theology the ideal of a pure church. They believed the adult conversion experience was necessary for an individual to become a full member in the church, unlike other Reformed churches. As such, the Congregationalists were a reciprocal influence on the Baptists. They differed in counting the children of believers in some sense members of the church. On the other hand, the Baptists required each member to experience conversion, followed by baptism. In England, the Anglican system of church government was taken over by King Henry VIII. Influenced by movements for reform and by his desire to legitimize his marriage to Anne Boleyn in 1533 after divorcing his first wife, Catherine of Aragon, Henry's government got Parliament to enact the First Act of Supremacy in 1534. It declared the reigning sovereign of England to be the only supreme head on earth of the Church in England. In the reign of Elizabeth I, this title was changed to Supreme Governor of the Church of England, an act still in effect. The Church of England ceased to be subject to the Church of Rome, but as the established church it continued to see itself as the Catholic Church in England and for several years continued most of the Roman Catholic traditions. Robert Brown, Henry Barrow, John Greenwood, John Penry, William Brewster, Thomas Jolly and John Robinson were notable people who established dissenting churches separate from the Church of England. The underground churches in England and exiles from Holland provided about 35 out of the 102 passengers on the Mayflower, which sailed from London in July 1620. They became known in history as the Pilgrim Fathers. The early Congregationalists sought to separate themselves from the Anglican Church in every possible way and even eschewed having church buildings. They met in homes for many years. In 1639 William Rothe, then rector of the parish church at Llanfaix in Monmouthshire, established the first independent church in Wales, according to the New England pattern, i.e., Congregational. The Tabernacle United Reformed Church at Llanfaix survives to this day. During the English Civil War, those who supported the parliamentary cause were invited by Parliament to discuss religious matters. The Westminster Confession of Faith was officially declared the statement of faith for both the Church of England and Church of Scotland, which was politically expedient for those in the Presbyterian-dominated English Parliament who approved of the Solemn League and Covenant. After the Second Civil War, the new model army, which was dominated by Congregationalists, seized control of the Parliament with Pride's Purge, arranged for the trial and executed Charles I in January 1649, and subsequently introduced a republican commonwealth dominated by independents such as Oliver Cromwell. This government would last until 1660, when the monarch was restored and episcopalism was re-established. In 1658, the Congregationalists created their own version of the Westminster Confession, called the Savoy Declaration, which remains the principal subordinate standard of Congregationalism. For a summary of Congregationalism in Scotland, see the paper presented to a joint meeting of the ministers of the United Reformed Church, Scottish Synod, and the Congregational Federation in Scotland by Rev. A. Patterson. Follow the link. Congregationalism in Scotland. Argentina. The mission to Argentina was the second foreign field tended by German Congregationalists. The work in South America began in 1921, when 4 Argentine churches urgently requested that denominational recognition be given George Geyer, who was serving them. The Illinois Conference licensed Geyer, who worked among Germans from Russia who were very similar to their kin in the United States and in Canada. The South American Germans from Russia had learned about Congregationalism in letters from relatives in the United States. In 1924, General Missionary John Holzer, whilst in Argentina for a brief visit, organized 6 churches. Australia. In 1977, most congregations of the Congregational Union of Australia merged with all churches of the Methodist Church of Australasia and a majority of churches of the Presbyterian Church of Australia to form the Uniting Church in Australia. Those congregations that did not join the Uniting Church formed the Fellowship of Congregational Churches or continued as Presbyterians. Some more ecumenically minded Congregationalists left the Fellowship of Congregational Churches in 1995 and formed the Congregational Federation of Australia. Bulgaria. Congregationalists were among the first Protestant missionaries to the Ottoman Empire and to the northwestern part of the European Ottoman Empire, which is now Bulgaria. These missionaries were significant contributors to the Bulgarian national revival movement. Today, Protestantism in Bulgaria represents the third largest religious group, behind Orthodox and Muslim. Missionaries from the United States first arrived in 1857–58, sent to Istanbul by the American Board of Commissioners for Foreign Missions. The ABC-FM was proposed in 1810 by the Congregationalist graduates of Williams College, M.A., and was chartered in 1812 to support missions by Congregationalists, Presbyterian, Dutch Reformed and other denominational members. The ABC-FM focused its efforts on southern Bulgaria and the Methodist Church on the region north of the Balkan Mountains. In 1857, Cyrus Hamlin and Charles Morse established 3 missionary centers in southern Bulgaria, in Odrine, Plovdiv and Stara Zagora. They were joined in 1859 by Russian-born naturalized America Frederick Flocken in 1859. American Presbyterian minister Elias Riggs commissioned, supported and edited the work of Bulgarian monk Neophyt Rilsky to create a Bible translations into Bulgarian which was then distributed widely in Bulgaria in 1871 and thereafter. This effort was supported by Congregationalist missionary Albert Long, Konstantin Fotonov, Rostodul Nikolov and Petko Slavakov. Reportedly, 2,000 copies of the newly translated Bulgarian-language New Testament were sold within the first 2 weeks. Congregational churches were established in Bansko, Veliko Turnovo, and Svistov between 1840 to 1878, followed by Sofia in 1899. By 1909, there were 19 congregational churches, with a total congregation of 1,456 in southern Bulgaria offering normal Sunday services, Sunday schools for children, biblical instruction for adults, as well as women's groups and youth groups. Summer Bible schools were held annually from 1896 to 1948. Congregationalists led by Dr. James F. Clark opened Bulgaria's first Protestant primary school for boys in Plovdiv in 1860. Followed 3 years later by a primary school for girls in Stara Zagora. In 1871 the two schools were moved to Samokov and merged as the American College, now considered the oldest American educational institution outside the U.S. In 1928, new facilities were constructed in Sofia, and the Samokov operation transferred to the American College of Sofia, now operated at a very high level by the Sofia American Schools, Inc. In 1874, a Bible college was opened in Ruse, Bulgaria for people wanting to become pastors. At the 1876 Annual Conference of Missionaries, a beginning of organizational activity in the country was established. The Evangelical Churches of Bulgaria formed a united association in 1909. The missionaries played a significant role in assisting the Bulgarians throw off the Turkish yoke, which included publishing the magazine Zornitsa, founded in 1864 by the initiative of Riggs and Long. Zornitsa became the most powerful and most widespread newspaper of the Bulgarian Renaissance. A small roadside marker on Bulgarian Highway 19 in the Rila Mountains, close to Gradovo, commemorates the support given the Bulgarian resistance by these early Congregationalist missionaries. On 3 September 1901, Congregationalist missionaries came to world attention in the Miss Stone affair when missionary Ellen Maria Stone, of Roxbury, Massachusetts, and her pregnant fellow missionary friend Macedonian-Bulgarian Katerina Stefanova-Silka, wife of an Albanian Protestant minister, were kidnapped while traveling between Bansko and Gornad as Humayar, by an internal Macedonian Adrianople revolutionary organization detachment led by the Voivoda Yana Sandansky and the sub-voivodas Rista Chernopiv and Krastyor Asenov, and ransomed to provide funds for revolutionary activities. Eventually, a heavy ransom raised by public subscription in the USA was paid on 18 January 1902 in Bansko, and the hostages were released on 2 February near Strumica, a full 5 months after being kidnapped. Widely covered by the media at the time, the event has been often dubbed America's first modern hostage crisis. The Bulgarian royal house, of Catholic German extraction, was unsympathetic to the American-inspired Protestants, and this mood became worse when Bulgaria sided with Germany in World War I and World War II. Matters became much worse when the Bulgarian Communist Party took power in 1944. Like the royal family, it too saw Protestantism closely linked to the West and hence more politically dangerous than traditional Orthodox Christianity. This prompted repressive legislation in the form of regulations for the organization and administration of the evangelical churches in the People's Republic of Bulgaria, and resulted in the harshest government repression, possibly the worst in the entire Eastern Bloc, intended to extinguish Protestantism altogether. Mass arrests of pastors, torture, long prison sentences and even disappearance were common. Similar tactics were used on parishioners. In 15 highly publicized mock show trials between the 8th of February and the 8th of March 1949, all the accused pastors confessed to a range of charges against them, including treason, spying, black marketing, and various immoral acts. State-appointed pastors were foisted on surviving congregations. As late as the 1980s, imprisonment and exile were still employed to destroy the remaining Protestant churches. The Congregationalist magazine, Zornitzer, was banned. Bibles became unobtainable. As a result, the number of Congregationalists is small, and estimated by Paul Moses in 1982 to number about 5,000, in 20 churches. More recent estimates indicate enrollment in Protestant churches of between 100,000 and 200,000, presumably reflecting the success of more recent missionary efforts of evangelical groups. The United Church of Christ has been described as the historic continuation of the Congregational churches. Canada. In Canada, the first foreign field, 31 churches that had been affiliated with the General Conference became part of the United Church of Canada when that denomination was founded in 1925 by the merger of the Canadian Congregationalist and Methodist churches, and two-thirds of the congregations of the Presbyterian Church in Canada. In 1988, a number of UCC congregations separated from the National Church, which they felt was moving away theologically and in practice from biblical Christianity. Many of the former UCC congregations banded together as the new Congregational Christian Churches in Canada. Congregational Christian Churches in Canada. The Congregational Christian Churches in Canada is an evangelical, Protestant, Christian denomination, headquartered in Brantford, Ontario, and a member of the World Evangelical Congregational Fellowship. The name Congregational generally describes its preferred organizational style, which promotes local church autonomy and ownership, while fostering fellowship and accountability between churches at the national level. Ireland. The Congregational Union of Ireland was founded in 1829 and currently has around 26 member churches. In 1899 it absorbed the Irish Evangelical Society. One of its ministers, Robert McAvoy, is secretary of an evangelical and creationist pressure group, the Caleb Foundation. Samoa. The Congregational Christian Church of Samoa is one of the largest group of churches throughout the Pacific region. It was founded in 1830 by the London Missionary Society missionary John Williams on the island of Savary. As the church grew, it established and continues to support theological colleges in Samoa and Fiji. There are over 100,000 members attending over 2,000 congregations throughout the world, most of which are located in Samoa, American Samoa, New Zealand, Australia and America. The Christian Congregational Church of Jamaica falls under the Constitution of the Samoan Church. Southern Africa. There are many united congregational churches in Southern Africa, all independently run, however they all meet together to discuss challenges. Visit www.uccsa.co.za/United Kingdom. In 1972, about three-quarters of English congregational churches merged with the Presbyterian Church of England to form the United Reformed Church. However, about 600 congregational churches have continued in their historic independent tradition. Under the Act of Parliament that dealt with the financial and property issues arising from the merger between what had become the Congregational Church of England and Wales and the Presbyterian Church of England, certain assets were divided between the various parties. In England there are three main groups of continuing Congregationalists. These are the Congregational Federation, which has offices in Nottingham and Manchester, the Evangelical Fellowship of Congregational Churches, and about 100 congregational churches that are loosely federated with other congregations in the Fellowship of Independent Evangelical Churches, or are unaffiliated. In 1981, the United Reformed Church merged with the Reformed Association of Churches of Christ and, in 2000, Just over half of the churches in the Congregational Union of Scotland also joined the United Reformed Church. The remainder of Congregational churches in Scotland joined the Congregational Federation. Wales traditionally is the part which has the largest share of Congregationalists among the population, most Congregationalists being members of Undeb I'r Benwa Cymraeg, which is particularly important in Carmarthenshire and Brecknockshire. The London Missionary Society was effectively the world mission arm of British Congregationalists. It sponsored missionaries including Eric Liddell and David Livingstone. As thinking developed, particularly in the context of decolonization, and churches wanted to recognize the gifts of people of the South, the London Missionary Society transformed into the Council for World Mission. The current president of the Congregational Federation is Betty Bentham.